Okay, we're going to talk about these 12 sons, and we'll just briefly remember what we said at the end of our class last time. God saw that Leah was hated, the old version says. The New King James says loved less. And that's true, I imagine. It appears that what happens is Jacob was in love with Rachel. He obviously loved and took care of and provided for Leah and her family, her children too. But he apparently was in love with Rachel, and everybody knew it. Well, God knew it, so he opened Leah's womb and allowed her to have children. And she had 4: Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah. You got it? I want you to remember these boys, because when we get over in Joshua and the land is divided, the tribes will take the names of these boys, and the generations flowing from these boys, each of them will be given the land that God promised to their forefathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So you've got to remember these boys and their names, and you should remember them in order. That'll be important before we get through today, even. The order of these boys in some instances that the text gives us. So here's Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah. They're born to Leah. So their mother is Leah. All right? Now, Rachel went to her husband and said, "Give me children, or else I die." And he says, "If I'm in the place of God," and obviously he's not, and obviously God's providence is involved in all of this and directing it. So, what we see in Rachel is a resentment arising toward her sister. Remember now, these are sisters, these first two, Rachel and Leah. They're sisters. So not only are we dealing with bigamy in this case, but we're dealing with sisters being married to the same husband. Not a really healthy situation, is it? Now, how did that situation arise? Their father was Laban, and it all came out of a surreptitious kind of trickery that was caused by their father. So this is not a good situation that we've got. I mean, we read it and we say, oh, okay. If you just stop and think about it, if you were any one of those characters, it would be a terrible situation for you, wouldn't it? Just if you just can imagine how it was for these people. So you've got resentment, you've got jealousy, unashamed bargaining with God's purposes even in this case, don't you? At the least, we don't have Jacob having to wait for seed to fulfill God's promise. We don't have that in this story. We did have that with Abraham, didn't we? And we did have that with Isaac. But we don't have that with Jacob. So that's kind of a blessing in disguise, maybe, in this case. Okay, so Rachel said, "Here's my handmaid, Bilhah." And she was given to Jacob and had two more sons. These sons, well, Rachel says, "She shall bear them on my knees." Now, I don't know if they literally did that to show that this was a surrogate situation and that these children should be counted as Rachel's children, or whether that's figurative. I just don't know that. But it's an interesting comment on it, at least. Bilhah bore two sons, Dan and Naphtali. You got it? And these are to be accounted to Rachel as her children, born by her handmaiden, Bilhah, Dan and Naphtali. So we've got Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah. They're on this side with Leah. We've got Dan and Naphtali. They're over on this side. Now, to kind of observe the resentment and the jealousy inside the family, Leah, who already has twice as many children as Rachel does, if we count the surrogate children for Rachel, she's got to have more. It's not done. So she brings her maidservant and gives him to Jacob. This is very similar now to Sarah and Hagar's story. You remember earlier? Very similar. So she gives her handmaiden. Her name is Zilpah. Stop just a minute. I don't think, unless I have missed something, that Bilhah and Zilpah's names come up again. That's interesting. This is all in chapter 30 of Genesis, if you want to read. Chapter 30. They're not named again. They are called maidservants. Let me tell you, I'm going to jump ahead and tell you a little story. I think it's 34 or 35 where the entourage that leaves Laban and heads south to be where Isaac and Rebekah lived, to make a new home for themselves. Really, by God's providence, to make home where God was going to give them the land that was a part of the promise. So they come to the Jabbok River, and they get word that Esau is on his way with a troop of men to meet them on the east side of the Jordan River. And Jacob gets frightened, and he decides to put his people in a position where they won't be murdered by Esau. And he lines them up across the river. And he puts in front Bilhah and Zilpah's children, Dan and Naphtali, Gad and Asher. And then behind them, he puts Leah's children. And then behind them, he puts Rachel and Joseph. Rachel is pregnant, but Benjamin hasn't been born yet. Now, if you were Dan and Naphtali and Gad and Asher, how would you feel about that? You see, I told you a while ago, this thing with the coat of many colors, that's not the half of it. The resentment in that family had to be massive. And those boys had to know how their daddy felt about them when he put them in the front and he put Joseph in the back. You see, there are going to be dreams, there are going to be all kinds of things that foster this, but that coat was just the last straw. Don't you think? It's an amazing story of emotions that we're into with this family as you read it and study and think how they must have felt about what was going on. Yes, sir.
Do we know anything more about Bilhah and Zilpah, the sisters?
We don't know. They're called maidservants. They're named. Why would you think they would be named? I think you're onto it with that. These two maidservants are mothers of tribes in Israel. Literally, birth mothers, at least, of tribes in Israel. Why do you think there is this emphasis told in the text of their being maidservants and doing this for Rachel and Leah? Because Rachel and Leah are the legitimate wives of Jacob? You think that's involved at least? Maybe. We're not told. But these maidservants have a role in all of this that's pretty amazing in God's plan, isn't it? Okay. Comment, anybody? Anybody want to say anything at this point? Yes, sir. Yeah, maybe so. Could be. Try not to think about American history and Thomas Jefferson and some of those kinds of things either, coming out of your comment about things being done socially. Yes, sir. Of course. No. He's got a plan. Mm-hmm. Interesting, isn't it? Okay, it's a fascinating story. Raises all kinds of issues for us to think about. Okay, well, Reuben is the oldest boy. So remember now, we've had how many? 8. We've got 8. Now we have 6 over here and 2 over here, right? So Reuben gets involved. I think we'll not take time to go through all of that story. Anyway, in the end of it, Leah allows Rachel, or Rachel allows Leah, I'm sorry, to go into Jacob again. And they're going to have 2 more children. And this will be to Leah. So, 2 more children, Issachar and Zebulun. And these will be to Leah. And as your chart goes on the screen, she also has a daughter in this time period. And this daughter is Dinah. Now, I don't know if they had other daughters or not. There's nothing said about other daughters. So maybe there weren't any. Maybe these were all boys. Maybe that's God's providence, all boys. I don't know. That's another thing to think about. Maybe there were other daughters and they're not named. Dinah's named because Dinah's going to come into the story in chapter 34 of Genesis in a way that will impact the whole plan, as we'll see. So Dinah is named, and she is identified here. It's after that, then, that God allows Rachel to have a child. And he will be Joseph. She will die having another son later in the story. And he will be who? Benjamin. So those are going to be the 12. And we're going to have 8 over here and 4 over here. Right? Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah. Dan, Naphtali. Gad, Asher. Issachar, Zebulun. Joseph, Benjamin. Those are the 12. Have you got them in your mind? You got it? Huh? Is there a song about this? Okay. All right. We'll do it. Okay, so here they are. What? Yeah. Okay. Is it, you want to sing it? Do you know it? I don't know if I know this one. Sing it. Let's do it.
Reuben, Simeon, Levi, and Judah, Dan and Naphtali and Gad and Asher, Issachar, Zebulun, Joseph, and Benjamin. These are the 12 sons of Jacob.
Okay. We got it. We've got it. It does. It does. Now, if I can get the tune right, I'll be all right. All right. So that's the 12. Now then, I'm gonna skip some things because our time is running low, and I want to keep us on track, thinking about where this is going, what this is all about, really. The boys grew up in Laban's household. Most of them were grown men by the time they leave. So after the birth of Joseph, now Joseph will be 17 when they put him in the pit. So that's kind of our dating identifier here, landmark date. He's about 17 when that happens. So you can imagine this all taking a period of time, the boys growing up in Laban's household. Now they're going to see all kinds of maneuvering, shifting around. Remember, they have different mothers, these boys. There's all kinds of trickery going on between Laban and Jacob, having to do with their flocks and herds of animals. You all know the story about the speckled and spotted sheep and goats that they had. So we won't take a lot of time there. But the boys saw the deceptions of Jacob, even in that. He separated the sheep, the white ones, the black ones, the goats, separated all these animals, took certain ones that he knew would be more productive, reproductive, and apparently Laban was clueless to what Jacob was doing. So Jacob is involved in all of this trickery as well. So they finally leave. This is in Genesis 31. They leave that area, and Rachel and Leah had lost sympathy with their father. He had tricked them to getting married, and he was tricking Jacob into serving him. And so everybody is serving self and not serving one another. It's not a loving family, is what we're seeing in the text. And so Jacob finally decides they're going to leave. And you may remember Rachel's taking with her the teraphim, the family idols. And I'm not sure what all is involved in that. Uh, they're God believers, obviously. Maybe the idols are made out of something valuable and it's the value that you're looking at. Maybe they were family heirlooms of some kind that Laban had that his daughters wanted to take with them to have from home. I don't know what all is involved. There's no other indication that Rachel worshiped those idols. Is there anybody? As far as we know. But Rachel hid them and took them with her. Laban comes and wants to have them retrieved for him to take back with him. You would expect if they were heirlooms or if they were made out of gold or something invaluable that he would want them, knowing the kind of man he is in the story. Yes, sir. Absolutely. Yes, that's true. Could have been. He buries them under the tamarind tree. You remember that part? And to get rid of them. All right. Well, at any rate, Rachel hides them, and Laban doesn't find them. Now, not only do the boys, let's go back to the boys, the 12 sons, what they're seeing as they grow up. They grow up in Laban's household, place. They see all of that. Now they come down to the Jabbok Wadi, small river, and they see all this happening with Esau. Not only does Jacob show all this preference again to him, to them, to some of them, I guess we should say, but they see Jacob, their father, frightened to death of his brother. So all of that, I don't know if all of that had come out to these boys or not, but it must now. And they must know what all is in the background of their family at this point, you see. So they see the problem with Esau and experience it. And they see Jacob's preference for his children, some of his children, over other children, down here at this. They wrestle, the angel and Jacob wrestle with one another. Jacob comes out with a limp. His hip gets displaced, and Jacob comes out with a limp. That's kind of an interesting thing. Down the road, apparently that limp is going to stay with him. So it looks like a continuing thing for Jacob as a reminder of his wrestling with God. But now this is where we're going to begin to see Jacob going to be called Israel. Jacob's name is changed to Israel. He's no longer called Jacob. He would now be Israel, one who strives with God. El is God, Isra. He strives with God. And you remember that story. We plug that in here because that's where Israel gets their name, as a nation of people. And that impacts the promise, you see. God's going to make them a nation. And he begins here the fulfillment of the nation promise by identifying the national name with the forefather, Jacob. So he'll be called Israel. So you can plug that in. Are you all seeing the stories are interesting, but they're not isolated? The stories all play into God's message in this book of Genesis, this plan that he had, you see. Yeah. Right, right. Well, the sequence of events is fascinating as we go along. Okay. Jacob calls the name of this place Peniel or Penuel, which means the face of God. And we're beginning to see, I think this is where you were going, we're beginning to see more Jacob's faith coming out. We've had all of this trickery, all these shenanigans going on, all of this deception in the family. But at the same time, we see this. Okay, so he meets with Esau, and Esau is not in the killing mode at this point. And so Esau and Jacob make up as brothers. Esau goes away to establish what nation? Edom. He goes to the south, and Jacob will go across the river into the promised land for Israel to take place. And the promise is repeated now. And so you want to get that. This is after they decide to be brothers again. Then the promise is repeated to Jacob. Why do you reckon that's all recorded? I think it's to confirm with Jacob that it'll be his seed now that the promise will be fulfilled with, not Esau's. This is the satisfaction, really, of that event earlier where the family blessing was given to Jacob. The birthright goes to Jacob, and so the promise goes to Jacob. You see that? So this has to be repeated to him directly, and he would receive the promise. Okay? Now then, there is this tragedy at Shechem. There are going to be two events that are very immoral in the story at this point with the boys, dealing with the boys. And you ask yourself, if you're not watching the theme of this, you ask yourself, why did God put that in the Bible? Dinah, who was mentioned earlier, is violated, probably raped. Apparently, she is raped. But she is violated by Shechem, who is the son of the guy who runs the town. And the boys get angry. Jacob doesn't do anything about it. That's odd. And if we had more time, we'd go into that maybe a little more. But at any rate, two of the boys, who are they? Simeon and Levi. Where are they in the list? Second and third. They're up toward the top of the list. They're the older boys in the group of older boys, right? Simeon and Levi. Number 2 and number 3 boy. Eventually go in and wipe out the city of Shechem and kill this boy that violated their sister. Hmm? Yeah, that's right. That's right. Dinah is Leah's daughter. Levi and Simeon are Leah's sons, right? And Dinah comes late in the list. So this is their younger sister, right? So this happens. Now, just tuck that away. This is a little bit like the Gresham novels where these things don't all come out for a while. Now, there's another bad event that takes place, a couple of them. Joseph's mother, Rachel, dies, and that's sad in the story. That pretty well has to be told because she dies giving birth to Benjamin, who is one of the tribes later, right? Okay. And then, I don't know, I guess I didn't get the slide on about Reuben. And Reuben violates Bilhah, and there she is named. At least he goes into her. They don't have a child, but she is a handmaiden that has had children to Jacob and considered his. And Bilhah has a relationship with this woman. Now, when we get to the end of the book of Genesis, Jacob is going to die, and he will give the blessing, pass the blessing on. Will it go to Reuben? No. Why? Because of his indiscretion with Bilhah, right? Will it go to Simeon and Levi? Simeon's next, Levi's third. No. Why? Because their violence in destroying Shechem. So who gets the blessing? Judah. Where does Jesus come from? What tribe? Judah. See how the story it has to tell what happened with Levi and Simeon. You say, why is that in the Bible? Well, that's why it's in the Bible. And Bilhah, I mean, there were other instances of immorality in the Bible, right? Why tell about Bilhah with Reuben? Because Reuben's the number one choice for the blessing. But he doesn't get it. You see? The story all fits, doesn't it? You got it? Okay, we got to quit. Good story. All right. Not so good, actually.